Greetings. This is TK Trav, aka Travis Magus, here with LVX777. Tonight we're going to continue our book study on the mystical Qabalah. We left off on chapter 10. That's where we will begin. We previously read about the 7 plus 3 Sephiroth, as well as the 4 worlds. Today we're going to get started a conversation about the paths in between each one of these Sephiroth. So hope you've got your learning caps on today. I will be your professor here in this class of Kabbalistic magic. So let's begin. Peace and greetings to everyone who is participating in this study. As you make your way into this video, please hit the like button. And yeah, get ready for some high quality Kabbalistic learnings. For sure. Terrio Cool Whip. Peace. L, peace and greetings. K Harris, peace. 9 Volta, peace. All right, like I said, be sure to hit the like button. And if you feel in a giving spirit, I appreciate your donations. If you could send it to Cash App, LVX777. So let's get started. Let's get started. We left off on chapter 9. We continue chapter 10. If I'm not mistaken. Did we actually read chapter 10? I think we stopped at the end of 9. Who was here the other day? Monique Mitchell, peace and greetings. Great to see you. Kai L, the God, peace, my God, peace. Cosmic Traveler, peace and greetings. Zero in the house, peace. Always good to see you. Okay. So L says we stopped at the end of 9. Sounds true enough to be true. All right, so let's get to it. Chapter 10, the paths upon the tree. The paths upon the tree. J. Baldhail, peace and greetings, my fellow occultist. All the way. Sirius Suit 888, peace and greetings. Peace. WT, peace. Says I'm marked at chapter X. That's where we at. Then. Star T44, peace. All right, who's ready for a breakthrough to be unlocked within these sentences? These sentences themselves are the magical keys. And if you've got enough of the accumulated data in your subconscious mind, then any one of these sentences, especially the highlighted ones, are liable to unlock something in you that you may not have expected. So here's looking forward to that. It happens to me even still. That's why I'm reading this book again. Sirius Suit asks, how was Hogwarts? I enjoy it. I'm enjoying the mystery of being a student at Hogwarts. Chapter 10, the paths upon the tree. 1. The Sefer Yetzirah refers to the 10 Sephiroth themselves, as well as the lines connecting them, as paths, and justly so, for they are all equally channels of divine influences. So remember that when you think about the paths, these paths are certainly channels of divine influence. But it is usual in practical working, and remember what I said about practical magic? I keep repeating this because I want you to understand it. What do I say about practical magic? Danny Mason Bay, peace. Jay Ballard says, serve the Lord with gladness, come before his presence with singing. Absolutely. What must I say? Always singing. So practical means that this is something that should affect your bank account. It should affect your health. It should affect your intelligence. It should affect your love life, your relationships in general. If it's practical, that means it affects and influences your everyday life, not just this conceptual, faraway spiritual idea, right? So, look, the paths are channels of divine influence, but it is usual in practical working to consider the lines between the Sephiroth only as the paths, and the Sephiroth themselves as spheres upon the tree. This is one of the many tricks and blinds to be found in the Kabbalistic system. For if we think of the paths as 32 in number, as they are given in the Sefer Yetzirah, we shall not be able to equate them with 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, which, with their numerical value and correspondences, form the key to the paths. And what she's referring to here is basically that the Sefer Yetzirah is one of the main textbooks that outlines what's going on with this mystical tree. And within that book, it talks about the 32 paths of wisdom. Now, in order for this to line up with the Hebrew alphabet, which only has the 22 main letters, what she's saying here is that out of the 32, you subtract 10 because the 10 are the spheres. They're going to be treated differently than the remaining 22 paths that are in between the spheres. Mo B, peace and great evening to you. Great evening to you. How are the candles coming along? So if we think of the paths as 32 in number, as they're given in the Sefer Yetzirah, we shall not be able to equate with them the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, which, with their numerical value and correspondences, form the key to the paths. Two, each path is said to represent the equilibrium of the two Sephiroth it connects. Okay, that's an easy way to get an idea of what is going on with each path. So let's think about the 32nd path. We think about how troublesome the 32nd path can be because we're talking about an experience that is essentially inverted, right? It's as if you have to head towards the danger in order to be safe. But what are the two Sephiroth that the 32nd path connects? It connects Malkuth and Yesod. So if you take Malkuth, which is the representation of your physical body and the physical experience, your five senses, tangible, right? Empirical evidence, everything you can see, hear, where everybody lives. And then you take Yesod, which is the realm of the imagination, dare to dream, right? Two drastically different places at first glance. So to transition from one to the other, it's almost as if you have to behave, what's the word for that? You have to behave contrary to what's expected. Counterintuitive, that's what the word is. So, anyways, what I'm saying is a great way to understand what's happening with each path is to get an understanding of the two Sephiroth that the paths connect. Sunshine Chick, always great to see you. Hope you're having a great evening as well. I'm burning champagne toast right now. That sounds like it smells lovely. Champagne toast. Hmm. Kevin Wise, peace, peace, my brother. Peace, peace. Okay, so once again, each path is said to represent the equilibrium of the two Sephiroth it connects. Fat Tony in the building. Peace, peace, my brother. And we have to study it in the light of our knowledge of the Sephiroth if we are to appreciate its significance. Certain symbols are also assigned to the paths themselves, right? Just like the Sephiroth, the 10 spheres have symbols associated with them so you can get to know them. The paths have the same thing. These are, as already noted, the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, the signs of the zodiac, the planets, and the elements. Now there are 12 signs in the zodiac, 7 planets, and 4 elements, making in all 23 symbols. All right. This does sound like deja vu. I feel like I read this. I mean, technically, I have read this already like 3 times on the YouTube channel. I feel like I might have read this on. I guess not. So, the 22 paths on the tree are going to be represented by the 12 zodiac, the 7 planets, and the elements, right? Altogether, that makes 23. Now, she keeps saying here that there's 22 paths, but there's 23 symbols. How do we reconcile that? Well, let's look at the element of earth, right? How are these to be arranged on 22 paths? Here's another Kabbalistic blind to puzzle the uninitiated. The answer is quite simple when it is known. Our consciousness being in the element of earth, we do not need the symbol of earth in our calculations when we make contact with the unseen, right? So we go ahead and rule that out because obviously we know all about that. So we leave it out and then find ourselves with the correct set of correspondences. Malkuth is all the earth we need for practical purposes. All right, does that make sense? So you got 22 paths. As far as the correspondences of each path, you're going to find the 12 zodiac, the 7 planets, that makes 19, and then the 3 remaining elements, which makes 22. Another set of symbols that we have to understand those 22 paths are the major arcana of the tarot. So, of course, you've got the Fool card representing the path between Kether and Hakma, the Magician card representing the path between Kether and Bina. You got the High Priestess card representing the path between Kether and Tifereth. You've got the Empress card representing the path between Bina and Hakma. So, if you can get an understanding for what those cards represent, you're already well on your way to having an understanding of the symbology of the paths. See how this all connects? This is why it's called a system, because all the symbols line up with everything else. It all fits. There's nothing missing or left out or left up to chance or left up to your feelings or left up to, it's just my truth. None of that. Monica Lawan, peace, peace. It's too early for that. 3. The third set of symbols to go upon the paths are the 22 trumps, or major arcana, of the tarot pack. With these 3 sets of symbols and the colors of the 4 color scales, our major symbolism is complete. The minor symbolism consists of the innumerable ramifications of the correspondences through all systems and planes. The Tree of Life, astrology, and tarot are not 3 mystical systems. Nope, they're not 3 mystical systems, but are 3 aspects of one and the same system. And each is unintelligible without the others. You see that? Might just scoot this over to get some more light. How about that? So again, the Tree of Life, astrology, and tarot are not 3 mystical systems, but 3 aspects of one and the same system, and each is unintelligible without the other. It is only when we study astrology on the basis of the tree that we have a philosophical system. Equally, does this apply to the tarot system of divination? And the tarot itself, with its comprehensive interpretations, gives the key to the tree as applied to human life. So, what she's saying here is that these cards give you a glimpse of how the forces of the tree make themselves known in reality. When we're reading tarot, we're reading the living tree, we're reading the living experience of the tree in your life. Yeah. Slow and easy is the way I wanna love you tonight. Slow and easy. 5. Astrology is so elusive because the uninitiated astrologer works on one plane only. But the initiated astrologer, with the tree as his ground plan, interprets on the four planes of the four worlds. And the effect of, shall we say, Saturn, is very different in Atziluth, where it is the divine mother, Bina, to what it is in Asaya. So in the four worlds, right, we've got those four different frequencies, four different levels, four different dimensions. Even though we're talking about Bina, Bina is going to behave and be experienced differently in Atziluth than in Asaya. 6. All systems of divination and all systems of practical magic find their principles and philosophy based upon the tree. All systems. Whoever tries to use them without this key is like the foolhardy person who has a pharmacopoeia of patient medicines and doses himself and his friends according to the descriptions given in the advertisements, wherein backache includes every disease which does not cause pain in the front. The initiate who knows his tree is like the scientific physician who understands the principles of physiology and the chemistry of drugs and prescribes accordingly. Mm. If you don't know, now you know. Rain, water, peace, peace. 7. Various methods of attributing the tarot cards have been worked out from traditional sources. In his little book, The Key to the Tarot, A.E. Waite gives the chief of these, but refrains from indicating which, in his opinion, is the correct one. In his valuable tabulation of the esoteric symbolism 777, Crowley has no such reticence, but gives the system as it is known among the initiates. This is the method I propose to follow in these pages, for I believe it to be the correct one, because the correspondences work out without discrepancies. That's a big thing. A thing they do in none of the other systems. It's got to work together. It's got to work together across the board. How many people here have a copy of Crowley's 777? I'm looking at mine on my tarot shelf. Oops. Sorry, cat. 8. According to the system, the four suits of the tarot pack are assigned to the four worlds of the Kabbalist and the four elements of the alchemist. The suit of wands is assigned to Atziluth and fire, the suit of cups to Bria and water, the suit of swords to Yetzirah and air, the suit of pentacles or coins to Asaya and earth. Right? We know that. We know all of this. 9. The four aces are assigned to Kether, the first Sephiroth, the four twos to Hakma, the second Sephiroth, and so down the pack, the four tens being assigned to Malkuth. It will thus be seen that the cards of the four suits of the tarot pack represent the action of the divine forces in each sphere and on each level of nature. Equally, if we know the significance of the tarot cards, we shall obtain much light on the nature of the paths and spheres to which they are assigned. Both these systems, the tarot and the tree, being of immemorial antiquity, their origin lost in the vistas of the ages, there is an enormous mass of symbolic correspondences accumulated through around each one of them. Every practical occultist who has ever worked with the tree has added to this stock of associations, making the symbols live in the astral by means of his operations. The tree and its keys are infinite in their adaptability. That right there is the verse for build your library of correspondences, right? Verse 9, chapter 10, build your library of correspondences. If we know the significance of the tarot cards, we shall obtain much light on the nature of the paths and spheres to which they are assigned. Mm. Every practical occultist who has ever worked with the tree has added to this stock of associations, this list of correspondences, making the symbols live in the astral. This is what you're doing when you're building your library of correspondences. You're making these symbols come to life in the astral because you're associating them with living knowledge, living wisdom by means of your operations. The tree and its keys are infinite in their adaptability. 10. The four court cards of the tarot are called in modern packs King, Queen, Knight, and Knave. But in the traditional packs, they are, according to Crowley, arranged and symbolized differently. The king being a mounted figure, indicating the swift action of the yod of the tetragrammaton in the sphere of the suit, and thus equating with the knight of the modern pack. So, in other words, traditionally you'll see the king dealing with the fire element and the wands, Atziluth, but with Crowley, he attributes the king to the seated figure, the mounted figure, and it is called the knight in the Crowley pack. The queen, as in modern packs, is a seated figure representing the steadfast forces of Hay of Tetragrammaton. The prince of the esoteric tarot is a seated figure corresponding to the vow of the Tetragrammaton, and the princess, the knave of modern packs, corresponds to the Hay of the sacred name. Peace, peace, curve. 11. The 22 trumps are assigned in various ways by various authorities, of which Mr. Wake gives a selection. But in our system, we will follow the order given by Crowley for reasons already discussed. What reasons? All of his symbols check out against each other, with no discrepancies. 12. In these pages, we propose to give the philosophical tree of life and enough practical instruction to render it available for meditation purposes. But we do not propose to give the practical Qabalah. Practical? What was practical again? We do not propose to give the practical Qabalah, which is used for magical purposes. So let's go back. In these pages, we propose to give the philosophical tree of life and enough practical instruction to render it available for meditation purposes. But we do not propose to give the practical Qabalah, which is used for magical purposes, because that can only properly be learnt and safely practiced in a temple of the mysteries. Reference must be made to the practical Kabbalah, however, in order to render some of the concepts intelligible. But those who are rightfully in possession of its keys need have no fear that these keys will be revealed to the uninitiated in these pages, for I am quite alive to the consequences of so doing. Hmm. I wonder what those consequences are. of giving out the keys to the uninitiated? Like, what are they threatened with? Is there a time frame on that non-disclosure agreement? 13. If, from the information here given, and as a result of pursuing the methods described herein, anyone is able to work out for himself the keys of the practical Kabbalah, as he well may, can any dispute that he is entitled to them? The tree is enormously valuable as a meditation glyph, quite apart from its use in magic. By meditations, such as I have described in my account of my own experiences on the 32nd path, it is possible to equilibrate the warring elements in one's own nature and bring them into harmonious balance. Shadow work? What did she say there? She said it is possible to equilibrate the warring elements in your own nature and bring those warring elements specifically and bring them into harmonious balance. It is also possible to get into sympathetic rapport with the different aspects of nature, which these symbols represent when applied to the macrocosm. Even if these forces are not given a definite form in talismanic magic, the information that is obtained from the study of one's own horoscope is not to be accepted passively as the dispensation of fate from which there is no appeal. We ought to realize that talismanic magic, or the less concentrated method of meditating upon the tree, should be used to compensate all unbalanced force in the horoscope and bring all into equilibrium. Talismanic magic is to astrology what medical treatment is to medical diagnosis. Boom, right there. That should open something up in your head. How have we looked at astrology all this time? We looked at astrology like, oh, this is the fate that the gods have given me, what's going to happen in my future. But what if you looked at it as, okay, here is the balance and unbalance with the elemental forces of your life. You now have a key to harmonize those forces. So instead of saying, oh, well, I've got Saturn in a bad place in my chart and I'm going to run from Saturn, why not embrace Saturn, right? Why not put Saturn as your phone background so you don't forget? Have you ever heard that before? Utilizing the Kabbalah and working with elemental forces to harmonize the elemental imbalance in your horoscope? Maybe, maybe not. That last line, look what she said. Talismanic magic is to astrology what medical treatment is to medical diagnosis. She's comparing astrology to a medical diagnosis, which means that the next step is to go and get your prescription. The bigger the headache, the bigger the pill. Whoa, this is the big pill. Oath, peace, and greetings. This is the big pill. Melly, peace, peace. Powerful stuff, Zero. K. Harris says, I literally did that in November out of exasperation. It let me look at Saturn in the eyes 24/7. Hmm. Good on you for taking action, right? For being practical with your magic. 15. It is not possible for me to give any formula of practical magic here. Before, in other words, you're not going to find any spells and rituals in this book. Fair enough. Before such formula can be made use of, it is necessary to have received the the grades of initiation to which they belong. Without these grades, the student is no better off than the person who tries to diagnose and treat his own complaints after reading a medical textbook. That delightful humorist, Jerome K. Jerome, has told us what happens in such a case. The unfortunate imagines that he has every disease prescribed therein, except housemaid's knee, and cannot make up his mind as to the appropriate treatment for everything he fancies is contraindicated. Hmm. 16. The ritual initiations of the greater mysteries of the Western esoteric tradition are based upon the principles of the Tree of Life. Each grade corresponds to a Sephiroth and confers, or should confer, if the order working them is worthy of the name. The powers of that sphere of nature. Each grade corresponds to a Sephiroth and confers, or should confer, if the order working them is a genuine is worthy of the name. The powers of that sphere of nature. One last time without the extra stuff. Each grade corresponds to a Sephiroth and confers the powers of that sphere of nature, that elemental force. Likewise, it opens up the paths leading to the Sephiroth so that the initiated is said to be Lord of the 32nd path when he has taken the initiation that corresponds to Yesod, or Lord of the 24th, 25th, and 26th paths when he has taken the initiation corresponding to Tifereth, which constitutes him a full initiate. Beyond this lie the higher grades of adulthood. So we've made jokes and talked about, oh, most people don't get past the 32nd path. And they have no reason to because they're not initiated into Kabbalistic science. However, what she's saying is that when you become initiated into a particular sphere of the tree, you are conferred the powers of the paths that connect that sphere. My cat is getting into some forbidden territory. Where was I? Um, yeah, so we're talking about being initiated in a certain Sephiroth confers the powers, or I should say, the authority of the paths that are attached to it. Dr. Zero, peace, peace. Black Salami says, I was healed by Jesus Christ through prayer, creating a covenant to repent. I beg you, flee from witchcraft and run to the power's source. It is God who can give you more. It is God who can give you the most. Beautiful poetry. 17. The aim of each grade of initiation of the greater mysteries is to introduce the candidate to the sphere of each Sephiroth in turn, working from Malkuth up the tree. The instructions given in each grade concern the symbolism and forces of the sphere to which it refers and the paths that equilibrate it. Okay, so in each grade, we're talking about working, when we talk about the work of that particular sphere, you're directly dealing with the symbols that represent that sphere. Obviously, right? That's what this book is about. If you're dealing with Malkuth, you need to understand the symbols of Malkuth. And the symbols of the paths that are connected to Malkuth, there are three, right? One that goes to Tifereth, one that goes to one that goes to Yesod, one that goes to Netzek, and one that goes to Hod. And you've got all kinds of symbols to work with. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. Is that a coincidence? So the instructions given in each grade concern the symbolism and forces of the sphere to which it refers and the paths that equilibrate it. The sign and word of the grade are used when treading these paths in the spirit vision. Etheric projection, maybe? Or projecting by them on the astral plane. Astral projection, maybe? Two different things, right? Consequently, the initiate is able to move with accuracy and certainty into whatsoever sphere of the unseen he desires to penetrate, and to countercheck all beings he meets and all visions he sees. For he knows what the colors of the paths are in all four scales, and he checks his vision by these. You ever meditate and just see colors? Would it be mind blowing if I told you that those colors are very similar to road signs when you're turning a certain street? Oh, this street is L Street or G Street or Norwich Street. If he is working up the 32nd path of Saturn, whose colors are all in the somber hues of indigo, dark blue, and black, he knows that something is amiss if a scarlet robed figure presents itself. Either that figure is elusive, or he himself has wandered off the path. She told you she's not going to give you the practical Qabalah, but she's going to give you certain clues to look for. In other words, check this out. If you're doing work on a specific Sephiroth, if you're doing etheric spirit vision, or if you're actually doing astral projection, there's going to be a certain set of symbols that you're looking for, or at least you're aware of, so that when they present themselves, you'll have validation that you're in the right spot. And if you see something that's massively contrary, you can say, hey, either this is deceiving me or I am not where I'm supposed to be. Does that make sense? So once again, like, it's a system. It's not just a free for all. It's not just do anything that goes. Like, it's literally structured in such a way to help you advance in a healthy, realistic method. And when I say advance, right, advance toward what? The expansion of consciousness, becoming more and more aware of what you actually are, who you actually are, and less consumed by identification with matter and the elements, because that's what impurity is. That's what impurity is. Impurity is not sex and drugs and partying. None of that stuff is impure, because all of matter is equal. Impurity is identifying with matter. That's what the sin is. When the soul convinces itself that it is matter and holds on to that, that's what we do. And that's what magic is, to help us expand beyond. So when I say advance, when I say expanding the consciousness, that's what I'm talking about. Being able to become aware of the fact that you are not matter. You're not any of this. You're something more than this. And the best way to come to that realization is through structured etheric vision and structured astral vision. This is something you can do, but you're going to have to sit down, separate from external distractions, and work on it. Cosmic Puzzle Piece says, so can I use the system to pinpoint the source of certain elementals? Absolutely. I mean, shit. If you just build your library of correspondences, that alone will help you pinpoint the source of certain elementals, right? Right? Because if you know that this type of pattern corresponds with this element, it won't take but a millisecond to identify, right? Now, for the most part, to be fair, the elementals that we're dealing with are mixed and blended, and we're dealing with percentages. But yeah, you're absolutely right. 18. To project the astral body along the paths, it is necessary for many reasons to hold the degrees of initiation to which they correspond, chief among which is that unless one has received the grade, one will be unknown to the guardians of the paths, and they will be inimical rather than helpful, and do all in their power to turn the wanderer back. So imagine you didn't know that. I'll just state what you said in plain language. If you're going to be astral projecting up and down the tree in different paths and different Sephiroth, it's going to help you a lot to become actually initiated, right? To actually do work in that sphere until you become competent in it. Because if you don't, there are intelligences of the spheres and of the paths, right? And if you find yourself there and you don't know the neighborhood, you don't know the people who run the neighborhood, right? When you get checked, you're facing enemies now instead of friends. So if you're going to be doing work in Qabalah, right, and you should have been acquainted with those symbols, you should have been acquainted with the energy of Qabalah and the intelligence of Qabalah. When you get there, you're going to meet the guardians of Qabalah. And depending on whether or not you are sufficiently aware of that space, what you come into contact with will be helpful to you or hurtful to you. So it's not that any of these spirits are evil or bad. It's you. Are you supposed to be there based on the experience? Are you doing the work? Because here's the thing, you can say whatever you want, but when it comes to doing the work, you're checked by the work. None of us are going to see your spiritual practice. None of us are going to see your meditations, your astral projections. You know what happens when you get there. You know if you get turned away, if you get deceived, if you come back and experience a whole lot of chaos that doesn't work out in your favor. Work where you are. Start where you are and move your way up. There's no need to really try to skip steps and rush and do something that you know you don't know anything about. So I'm outside keep a rod and they think I'm a punk, right? I go to my loaded Tiffereth and open the trunk. I told it. I ain't never scared. Yes, sir. Netsack, Malkuth. I ain't never scared. And as we've discussed before, it's not like there's a specific boogeyman waiting to haunt you. You have inside of your own imagination the forms of the things that terrify you and the things that you have no resistance against. Those are forms that you've already created, and forces of nature will just fill those forms. It's easier for everybody. So you're not going to see Jason Voorhees or Pennywise. You're going to see the thing that actually gives you the creeps. I'd like to go deeper into that, but I will not. Because if I do, I will not get through as many pages as I'd like to tonight. To project the astral body along the paths, it is necessary for many reasons to hold the degrees of initiation to which they correspond, chief among which is that unless one has received the grade, one will be unknown to the guardians of the paths, and they will be inimical rather than helpful, and do all in their power to turn the wanderer back. Secondly, if one should succeed in forcing one's way past the guardian, right, you can still do that. You might be clever enough. If one should succeed in forcing one's way past the guardian, one still has no means of counter checking the vision or knowing whether one is on or off the path. And there are plenty of beings in the lower sphere who are only ready to take advantage of presumptuous ignorance. So even if you do make it past security, you're not even going to know what you're doing. Lost and confused, but convinced that you know what's going on. And hey, anyone who is adventurous and doesn't like to follow authority and at the same time practices magic, I'm sure that all of us have experienced this before. And if you haven't and you fit that description that I just named, then you will certainly experience it when the time's right. Cat, get down. You go outside. Speaking of which, 19. These considerations, however, need in no way discourage anyone who wishes to meditate upon the paths and spheres in the manner I have described. And in the course of his meditations, he may so enter into the spirit of the path that its guardian shall come to know him and make him welcome. He will then literally have initiated himself, and no one can deny his right to be there. Boom. Boom. If you had any questions, that should have answered it right there. 20. The tree, considered from the initiatory standpoint, is the link between the microcosm, which is man, and the macrocosm, which is God made manifest in nature. A ritual initiation is the act of linking the microcosmic Sephiroth, the chakra, with the macrocosmic Sephiroth. It is the introduction of a newcomer to the sphere of it is the introduction of a newcomer to the sphere by those who are already there. They construct a symbolic representation of the sphere on the physical plane in the furniture of the temple. They construct an astral replica of it by concentrated imagination. And by means of invocation, they call down into this temple, not made with hands, the forces of the sphere of the Sephiroth they are working upon. 21. These forces stimulate the corresponding chakras of the initiate and wake them to activity in his aura. The process of self initiation by the meditations I have described is slower than the process of ritual initiation, but it is sure enough if persevered with by a suitable person. But one cannot teach a jellyfish to sing by feeding it on canary seed. Mm. What do you think that means? One cannot teach a jellyfish to sing by feeding it on canary seed. Peace, Ace. Welcome, welcome. Hope you're having a good night. Mhm. K. Harris says, I feel like it means you have to embody a thing. You can't just do as the thing does superficially. That sounds good, yeah. Chapter 11, the subject of Sephiroth. The subject of Sephiroth. 1. As above, so below. Man is a miniature macrocosm. All the factors that go to the makeup of the manifested universe are present in his nature. Hence, in his perfection, he is said to be higher than the angels. At the present time, however, the angels are fully evolved beings, and man is not. Thus, he is as much lower than the angels as a 3-year-old child is less developed than a 3-year-old dog. I always like that line. I think it illustrates a clear point. So, in regards to angels and human, right? Human is higher than the angel. However, human is not fully formed. The angels are. So, as she said in this last line, thus he is as much lower than the angels as a 3-year-old child is less developed than a 3-year-old dog. 2. Hitherto we have considered the tree of life as an epitome. Hitherto we have considered the tree of life as an epitome of the macrocosm, the universe, and the use of its symbols to put us in touch with the different spheres of objective nature. We will now consider it in relation to the subjective sphere of the nature of the individual. So, before we talked about the symbols and how the symbols connect us with other things that we can render tangible, we can see, hear, smell, taste, touch, etc. Now, we're going to talk about how it applies subjectively, how we interpret it internally. 3. The accepted correspondences as given by Crowley, who unfortunately never gives his authorities, so we do not know when he's using McGregor Mather's system and when he's relying upon his independent researches, are based partly on the astrological attribution of the planets assigned to the different Sephiroth and partly upon crude anatomical scheme of the human form, standing with its back to the tree. So take a look at the front cover of this book. This is too crude for our purposes and probably represents the work of later generations of scribes. During the Middle Ages, the Qabalah was rediscovered by European philosophers, and they grafted astrological and alchemical symbolism upon its system. Moreover, the rabbis themselves used an extremely detailed set of anatomical metaphors, discussing in detail the significance of every hair on the head of God and even more intimate parts of his anatomy. Such references cannot be taken literally and applied to the human form. 4. The Sephiroth, individually and in their pattern of relationships, represent, in relation to the macrocosm, the successive phases of evolution, and in relation to the microcosm, the different levels of consciousness and factors of character. That these levels of consciousness have some relation to the psychic spheres of the physical body is a reasonable assumption. But we must not be crude and medieval in the conclusions we draw. Occult anatomy and physiology have been worked out in detail in the yoga science of the Hindus, and we can learn much from their teachings. The latest advances in physiology are pointing to the conclusion that the link between mind and matter is to be sought primarily in the endocrine system of ductless glands, and only secondarily in the brain and central nervous system. We can learn much from this source of knowledge also, and piecing together all the information we can collect from every source, we may finally arrive, by inductive reasoning, at what the ancients learnt by means of the intuitive and deductive methods which they brought to such a high degree of perfection in their mystery schools. 5. It is generally agreed that the chakras or psychic centers described in yoga literature are not situated inside the organs with which they are associated, but in the auric envelope at spots roughly approximating thereto. We shall do well, therefore, not to associate the different Sephiroth with the limbs and other parts of our anatomy, but to regard the use of such analogies as metaphorical, and look for the psychic principles which they may be held to represent. So everybody's clear on that part, right? Your chakras don't actually represent the glands that they're associated with, and the tree of life spheres and paths don't literally correspond to body parts. If anything, you can say that they correspond to what your etheric body or astral body looks like, right? So nobody here thinks that the chakras are the actual organs, right? And nobody here actually thinks that Gibara is your right arm and Gijla is your left arm and Yasad are your private bits. 6. Before proceeding to a detailed study of each Sephiroth from the standpoint, it is very helpful to have a general survey of the tree as a whole, because so much of the elucidation of the symbolism depends upon the relationship of one symbol to another in the pattern of the tree. This chapter must needs be discursive and inconclusive, but it will enable the detailed study of the individual Sephiroth to be much more effectually carried out. 7. The first and most obvious division of the tree is into the three pillars. And this immediately reminds us of the three channels of prana described by the yogis: Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna. We know about those three, right? And we're talking about the three pillars. And the two principles, the yin and the yang Chinese philosophy, and the Tao, or the way, which is the equilibrium between them. By the agreement of witnesses, truth is established. By the agreement of witnesses, truth is established. And when we find three of the great metaphysical systems of the world in complete agreement, we may conclude that we are dealing with established principles and should accept them as such. Right? It should all check out across the board. It should all check out across the board. No matter who's saying it, no matter what time frame they said it in, by the agreement of witnesses, truth is established. Right? Sunshine Chick says, stand on principle. Right? Shout out to my Gnosis. 8. The central pillar should, in my opinion, be taken to represent consciousness, and the two side pillars as the positive and negative factors of manifestation. It is noteworthy that in the yoga system, consciousness is extended when Kundalini rises through the central channel of Sushumna, and that the Western magical operation of rising on the plains takes place up the central pillar of the tree. That is to say, the symbolism employed to induce this extension of consciousness does not take the Sephirah in their numerical order, commencing with Malkuth, but goes from Malkuth to Yesod and Yesod to Tifereth by what is called the path of the arrow. Path of the arrow. Oath says Tao, the universal sweet spot. Let me refrain myself from saying a word. Universal sweet spot. Everybody likes that. 9. Malkuth, the sphere of the earth, is taken by occultists as signifying brain consciousness, as is proved by the fact that after any astral projection, the ceremonial return is made to Malkuth and normal consciousness reestablished therein. Right? We're talking about the path of the arrow. Pay attention. 9. Malkuth. 10. Yesod. The sphere of Levana, the moon, is taken as psychic consciousness and also as the reproductive center. Tifereth is taken as the higher psychism, the true illuminated vision, and is associated with the highest grade of the initiation of the personality, as is evidenced by the fact that to it is assigned, in the system taken by Crowley from Mathers, the first of the grades of adulthood. All right, so that's Malkuth, Yesod, Tifereth. Check this out, everybody's favorite, Doth, the mysterious, invisible Sephiroth, which is never marked upon the tree, is associated in the Western system with the nape of the neck, the point where the spine meets the skull, the spot at which the development of the brain from the notochord took place in our primeval ancestors. Doth is usually held to represent the consciousness of another dimension, or the consciousness of another level or plane. It essentially represents the idea of change of key. Change of key. If you're familiar with playing music, like instruments, reading sheet music and whatnot, you know that the song is in a certain key, and there are some fancy songs that call for a change in key, which means that the whole notes and the scale, everything changes. We've all heard it before, but it's difficult to describe if you haven't performed the music. Anyways, that's Doth. 12, Kether, right? Malkuth, Yasad, Tiferet, Doth, Kether. This is the path of the arrow, right? The middle path. 12, Kether is called the crown. Now, a crown is above the head, and Kether is generally held to represent a form of consciousness which is not achieved during incarnation. It is essentially outside the scheme of things, so far as the planes of form are concerned. The spiritual experience associated with Kether is union with God, and whoso achieves that experience is said to enter into the light and come not forth again. Have you ever heard of someone who entered the light and didn't come forth again? Somebody who walked with God and was not. He knock you upside the head. 13. These Sephiroth unquestionably have their correlations in the chakras of the Hindu system, but the correspondences are given differently by different authorities. As the method of classification is different, the West using a fourfold system and the East a sevenfold system, correlation is not easy to obtain. And in my opinion, it is better to look for first principles rather than obtain a tidy pattern of arrangement which does violence to the correspondences. Mm. In other words, hell, she almost literally said stand on principles. She says that instead of trying to force something to fit, like, people trying to include Uranus and Neptune and Pluto on the tree, instead of trying to force something to fit just because it's convenient with what's happening in today's culture. No, 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 no. First thing you want to do is look for the principles that we're talking about, right? Because if you're looking at the principles, you're going to find connections that, well, maybe somebody missed. My gnosis, peace, peace. My gnosis says, fam, peace to everybody. I'm in the streets, sticking and moving, but I've been listening and tapped in. Stand on principle. Amen. Amen. Stand on principle. Can't stop, won't stop. I was gonna say shout out to Diddy because we can't stop because we won't stop. I was reading Wikipedia about Jodeci and how they started, and it turns out that Diddy actually had a lot to do with getting them in the door. Of course, I didn't know that. I guess he wasn't always a supervillain. He did some good things, as everybody, right? Don't believe the hype. The media will have you thinking that certain people are completely evil, but some of these folks, I mean, you know what I'm saying, they did some fucked up things, but you know how the hive mind, the egregore, will take this shit and spin it all the way to extremes, just like the recent situation we've got with the killing of a high-profile figure. And you got all these people in the culture with their whole eat the rich stuff. Don't get caught up in these whirlwinds, man. People are stupid as hell. They don't know what's good for them. Hence, they display it all day, every day. I don't know about you, but I don't take any joy in celebrating anybody's death or anybody's fall from grace, right? Suffering in a jail. I mean, you know, I'm not saying that people didn't do things that were wrong. All I'm saying is, like, the shit has nothing to do with me. So why would I invest my energy and emotion into it, as opposed to looking at life events from a neutral and balanced middle position? But that's neither here, and it damn sure ain't there. 14. The only two writers known to me who have attempted this correlation are Crowley and General J.F.C. Fuller. General Fuller assigns the Muladhara lotus to Malkuth, pointing out that its four petals correspond with the four elements. It is interesting to note that in the Queen scale of color, as given by Crowley, the sphere of Malkuth is represented as divided into four quarters, colored respectively citrine, olive, russet, and black, to represent the four elements and bearing the closest resemblance to the usual representations of the four petaled lotus. 15. The lotus is represented as situated in the perineum and is associated with the anus and the function of excretion. That's your Malkuth. That's where Malkuth is on the body of God, right? Think about that correlation. In column 21 of the table of correspondences given by Crowley in 777, he attributes the buttocks. Buttocks. What says buttocks? In 777, Crowley attributes the buttocks and the anus of the perfected man to Malkuth. I consider that from every point of view the attribution of Fuller, who refers the Muladhara lotus to Malkuth, is to be preferred to that of Crowley, who in column CXVIII refers to Yesod, thus contradicting himself. In the infantile mind, according to Freud, the functions of reproduction and excretion are confused. Uh oh. But I do not consider that this attribution is one that can be generally accepted or ought to be perpetuated. Well, then why did you throw that in there, Dion Fortune? I think that was another hint or clue. 16. And don't we see beautiful examples of the fact that our world is steeped and saturated and marinated in Malkuth obsession with no plans to evolve whatsoever. 16. Malkuth, viewed as the Muladhara lotus, represents, we may take it, the end result of the life process, their final concretion in form. Damn. So what is she saying about form? Right? What's she saying about solid form? This level of existence, man, is literally the shit of the universe. Your car, your clothes, that lovely body of your partner, your artwork, your house, all these physical things are literally the shit of the universe. But let's see what Dion Fortune has to say. One more time. Malkuth, viewed as the Muladhara lotus, represents, we may take it, the end result of the life process, their final concretion and form, and their submission to the disintegrating influences of death in order that their substance may be utilized again. The form into which they have been organized by the slow processes of evolution has served its purpose, and the force must be set free. This is the spiritual significance of the process of excretion, purification, and decomposition. And what did I just say? And what have I been saying? The impurity is when you identify as matter. That's why it's impure. You're literally identifying as the cosmic turd. Now, why you want to go and do that, love, huh? That's what the real sin is. Imagine a god on the toilet and you identifying what drops out and is flushed away to be repurposed as fertilizer. So close to the clip off that you can smell it, and it isn't pleasant. What must I say? What must I do to show how much? The spiritual significance of the process of excretion, purification, and decomposition. Do you see the Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva there? Whenever you see a three, whenever you see a three, it's the three gunas: Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva. And here's the thing, like Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva appear on every level of life. 17. The Svadhisthana chakra, the six-petaled lotus, at the base of the generative organs, is assigned by General Fuller to Yasod. This agrees with the Western tradition, which assigns Yasod to the reproductive organs of the divine man. Its astrological correspondences with the moon, Diana Hecate, also agree with this attribution. Crowley, throw assigning Yasod to the phallus in column XXI of 777, 21, assigns the Svadhisthana lotus to Hod, Mercury. It is difficult to understand this attribution, and as he does not give his authority, I consider it better to adhere to the principle of referring the levels of consciousness to the central pillar. Look at what she did there. She showed you an example of how she's operating. Even though she's telling you I'm pulling a lot of what I'm stating from Crowley and 777, I'm not going to force something to fit just because Crowley said it. When it don't make sense to what I understand, I'm gonna go back to the principles. Do you see us? So this is what I'm saying, right? I'm not taking Dion Fortune as this holy gospel word. Everything that she's saying makes sense, lines up, and checks out against multiple different references. However, if she said something that just don't line up, I'm gonna refer back to principle and not allegiance with Dion Fortune, right? Do you do that? When you're listening to somebody who's teaching you about whatever concept, do you just take what they say, whatever, even if it don't sound right, don't feel right? Or do you check it based on principle? That's what she just showed us right there. She showed us that, yeah, I'm following what Crowley wrote in 777. However, he attributed Svadhisthana to Hod, and quite frankly, that doesn't make any sense to me. And I don't see where he got it from. So I'm going to stand on principle. I'm going to go back and check some of the correspondences that she mentioned before. Alkalinity light. Peace. 18. Tifereth, by universal consent, represents the solar plexus and breast. It, therefore, seems reasonable to attribute to the Manipura and Anahata chakras, as Crowley does. Fuller attributes these chakras to Gibara and Chesed. But as these two Sephiroth find their equilibrium in Tifereth, this attribution presents no difficulty and causes no discrepancy. 19. In the same way, the Vishuddhi chakra, which in the Hindu system correlates with the larynx and is referred to Bina by Crawley, and the Ajna chakra at the root of the nose, I'll have to admit that's a little bit weird, which correlates with the pineal gland and is referred to Hakma by the same authority, may be taken as uniting for their function in Doth, situated at the base of the skull. 20. The Sahasrara chakra, the thousand petaled lotus, situated above the head, is referred by Crowley to Kether, and there can be little reason to quarrel with this attribution, for it is foreshadowed in the very name of the first path, Kether, the crown, which rests upon and above the head. 21. A lot of 21 happening tonight. The two flanking pillars of severity and mercy can readily be seen as representing the positive and negative principles. And their respective Sephiroth is representing the modes of functioning of these forces upon the different levels. Galactic peace and greetings. 22. The pillar of severity contains Bina, Gibera, and Hod, or Saturn, Mars, and Mercury. The pillar of mercy contains Hakma, Chesed, and Netzach, or the zodiac, Jupiter, and Venus. Hakma and Bina, in the symbolism of the Qabalah, are represented by male and female figures and are the supernal father and mother, or in more philosophical language, the positive and negative principles of the universe, the yang and the yin, of which maleness and femaleness are but specialized aspects, right? What came first, the Bible or Kabbalah? What must I say? What must I do to show how much? Page 76, chapter 11, verse 23. Chesed, Jupiter, and Geburah, Mars, are both represented in Kabbalistic symbolism as crowned figures. The red sphere and the blue sphere, they're both represented as crowned figures. The former, a lawgiver upon his throne, and the latter, a warrior king in his chariot. These are the constructive and destructive principles, respectively, of the entire universe, right? We just talked about the supernal father and the supernal mother. What's one level below them? The constructive and the destructive principles of the universe. It is interesting to note that Bina, the supernal mother, is also Saturn, the solidifier, who connects through his sickle with death, with his scythe, and time with his hourglass. All that is Bina right there. All that is Bina right there. In Bina, we find the root of form. It is said of Malkuth in the Sefer Yetzirah that it sitteth upon the throne of Bina. Matter has its root in Bina, Saturn, death. Form is the destroyer of force. That you should have memorized. Form is the destroyer of force. Got it? Why? Because force is free roaming, it's just going about doing its thing. But when you encapsulate it, when you capture it, when you catch that Pokemon in a Pokeball, the force can no longer roam freely and it has no choice but to bounce around until it dies like a fly trapped in a small room. Form is the destroyer of force. With the passive destroyer goes also the active destroyer. Okay, now you see where we're going with this? The passive destroyer is Bina. Who's the active destroyer? The active destroyer, we find Mars, Geburah, immediately below it on the pillar of severity. Thus is the force locked up in form, set free by the destructive influence of Mars, the Shiva aspect of the Godhead. Hakma, the zodiac, represents kinetic force, and Chesed, Jupiter, the benign king, represents organized force. And the two are synthesized in Tifereth, the Christ center, the Redeemer, the Equilibrator, the Equilibrator. So think about that. Let's think about the second triangle. I think that's the astral triangle. Geburah, the destroyer, right? The active destroyer. Chesed, Saturn, excuse me, Chesed, Jupiter, the organizing force. So we've got the destructive form, the destroyer of form, and the organizer of force. The destroyer of form, the war god, and the organizer of form, the peace god. Excuse me. Okay. On the left side, we've got form. On the right side, we've got force. On the left side, Mars, that's the destroyer of form. On the right side, Jupiter, that's the organizer of force. The two balance each other in what we call Tifereth. Tifereth. And there's the Christ Center, right? Apparently, we got some more of these folks in the chat. Rainy One BBB says, sorry, y'all, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. There's your Tifereth. Tifereth, the Christ Center, is the balancing aspect of the destroyer of form and the organizer of force. They work together when they meet in the equilibrator. And by the way, there's your three again. With every three, you should see the three gunas: Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva. Are we tracking? We following? We all on board? Everybody awake? 24. The next trinity of Netzach, Hod, and Yesod represents the magical and astral side of things. Netzach, Venus, represents the higher aspects of the elemental forces. Okay, the green ray. And Hod, Mercury, represents the mind side of magic. You guys have heard me talk about Orphic versus Hermetic magic, right? This is what it is. Okay, so when I say Orphic magic, think about Netzach Venus. When I think about Hermetic magic, think about Hod Mercury. Let's read it again. Netzach Venus represents the higher aspects of the elemental forces, the green ray. That's why the Orphic magician is intuitive, dealing with nature, dealing with their feelings, dealing with the moving, living, breathing aspect of what we call reality. And Hod, Mercury, the Hermetic scientist, represents the mind side of magic. We think about it, we study it all day. That's how we break through. The one is the mystic, and the other the occult. And they synthesize in the elemental Yesod. So the two come together and find their balance in Yesod. Just like the wartime king, destroyer of form, and the peacetime king, organizer of force, find their peace in Tifereth. Just like the Orphic magician and the Hermetic magician find their peace in Yesod. Look at that now. On the lower triangle, we've got the Orphic magician and the Hermetic magician. On the higher triad, we've got the wartime king and the peacetime king. And on the higher, we've got the cosmic mother and the cosmic father. The same energies, but operating on a different plane of existence, right? Once again, you've got Kether, which is the one, the all, the unity, the crown, that which will not be experienced with incarnation. On a lower aspect, we've got Tifereth, which is the harmony, the beauty, the peace, the equilibriator, the Christ center. And on a lower balance, we've got Yesod, which is the elemental imagination, we'll say. Let's keep going. This pair of Sephiroth should never be considered apart, any more than the upper pair of Gibra and Gijula, which is another name for Chesed. This is indicated by the fact that the Qabalah attributes them respectively to the right and left arms and the right and left legs. 25. It will thus be seen that the three form Sephiroth are in the pillar of severity. The three form Sephiroth, right, which are Bina, Hod, and Gibra, the three form Sephiroth are on the pillar of severity, and the three force Sephiroth are the pillar of mercy, which are Hakma, Chesed, and Netzach. Which Bina at its head is the female principle, and the Pingala of the Hindus, and the Yin of the Chinese. The pillar of mercy with Hakma at its head is the Ida of the Hindus, and the Yang of the Chinese. And the pillar of equilibrium is Sushumna and Tao. Beautiful, 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 wonderful stuff. All right. So we're going on to chapter 12. Y'all learning? Are we learning? Are we awake? Are we vibrant? Give me something in the chat. Let me know that you're here, that this is relevant to you. It may or may not be practical at the moment, but at least you're building your library of correspondences. Talk to me. Mm-hmm. Doing good, doing good, doing good. Okay. K Harris says absorbing the info. Fantastic. Moby gives me my favorite emojis. Nice. Elisha Eternal says present. Right, right. We got Hearts of Fire, Passion. L says definitely. Right. Monique Purple Hearts. And Human Education Green Hearts. Dub VT. Hell yeah. Mike's art here, meditating on this. All right, cool, cool. Let me get me some more ice in my cup, and we shall continue with chapter 12. We're going at a pretty good rate. It's only been an hour and a half. I read two chapters. BRB. right, all right. All right, all right. Everybody who see the leprechaun in the tree say yeah. And we are back. And we are big back. Framestar Films. Peace, peace. Peace, peace. Did Kristen ever get back to you? Cosmic Traveler says second time around is making much more sense to my level of receiving the info. Perfect. Perfect. Elish, eternal peace, peace. Naughty by nature. It is indeed Saturn's day. Peace, Nadraj Ram. Mr. Ra, greetings. All right. Chapter 12, The Gods Upon the Tree. The Gods Upon the Tree. Poison Polished Nailco says, I'm just waiting on my hard copy to follow along. Excellent, excellent. It's a great book to have. As you can see, I read it over and over again. 1. All students of comparative religion and its poor relation, folklore, are agreed that primitive man, observing and beginning to analyze the natural phenomena surrounding him, attributed them to the agency of beings akin to himself in nature and type, but transcending him in power. Right? So, all students of religions and folklore, we can all agree that early man, primitive man, saw natural phenomena going on in the world, and we attributed this natural phenomena, whether it's thunderstorms or our crops growing well, or a successful romantic endeavor or business endeavor, all these different phenomena, we attributed them to beings that were kind of like us, but with greater power. As he could not see them, he not unnaturally called them invisible. And as he could not see his own mind during life or his friend's soul after death, he concluded that the beings that produced natural phenomena were of the same nature as the invisible but active mind and soul. So these beings that were like us but more powerful, right, that control the phenomena of our lives, they're invisible, and they're of the same nature of our mind and our soul. That's what early man has 100% come to an agreement on. If anything, that's what our accumulated existence on this planet has brought us to a conclusion of. Mm. Not yet. I messaged on IG. Can you send her email? Maybe no worries if not. Okay. Yes. Yes. I'll reach out again in a more uh what's the word? Direct, serious, expecting a response type of manner. All says are the gods the fruit upon the tree. Well, you gotta think about it. What is the fruit? A fruit is the substance of the tree with the seeds on the inside. With the seeds on the inside. Two. Now, all this sounds very crude as it is put by the anthropologists, but that is only because when translating savage ideas, they choose words that have crude associations. For instance, the standard translations of one of the chief scriptures of China refers to the venerable philosopher Lao Tzu as the old boy. This sounds comical to European ears, yet it is not so far removed from the words of another scripture which has been fortunate enough to receive translation at the hands of those who reverenced it. Except ye become as a little child. I am not a sinologue, but I incline to the opinion that the translation eternal child would have been equally accurate and in better taste. Wow. The old boy could have been called the eternal child. The disrespect. Three, there's a saying in the mysteries, see that ye blaspheme not the name by which another knoweth his God. For if ye do this in Allah, you will do it in Adonai. Four, and after all, was primitive man so very far off the mark when he attributed the causation of natural phenomena to activities of the same nature as the thought process of the human mind, but upon a higher arc, right? Is not that the point towards which both physics and metaphysics are gradually converging? Supposing we were to recast the statement of the savage philosopher and say, the essential nature of man is similar in type to that of his creator, would we be held to have said anything either blasphemous or ridiculous? Let me read that again for me. The essential nature of man is similar in type to that of his creator, right? Would saying that be saying anything blasphemous or ridiculous? I don't think so. Five, we may personalize natural forces in terms of human consciousness, or we may abstract human consciousness in terms of natural forces. Think about that just real quick. We may personalize natural forces in terms of human consciousness. Oh, the trees are mad at me. Oh, the wind is happy. The sun is happy. Or we may abstract human consciousness in terms of natural forces. I think that's more gearing towards the whole thing about bad luck. Both are legitimate proceedings in occult metaphysics, and the process yields some very interesting clues and some very important practical applications. Practical. We must not, however, make the mistake of the ignorant and say A is B when we mean A is of the same nature as B. But equally, we may legitimately avail ourselves of the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below. Because if A and B are of the same nature, the laws governing A can be predicated concerning B. What is true of the drop is true of the ocean. Hmm. Consequently, if we know anything concerning the nature of A, we may conclude that, allowing for the difference in scale, it will apply to B. This is the method of analogy used in the inductive science of the ancients. And provided it is counter-checked by observation and experiment, it can yield some very fruitful results and cut out many leagues of weary wandering in the dark. 6. The personification and deification of the natural forces was man's first crude and shrewd attempt to evolve a monistic theory of the universe and save himself from the destructive and crippling influence of an unresolved dualism. As age by age extended his knowledge and elaborated his intellectual processes, he read more and more significance into the first simple classifications. Nevertheless, he did not discard his original classifications because they were fundamentally sound and represented actualities. He simply elaborated and extended them. And finally, when he fell on evil times, he overlaid them with superstition. 7. We should not therefore regard the pagan pantheons as so many aberrations of the human mind, nor should we try to understand them from the viewpoint of the uninstructed and uninitiated. We should try to find out what they must have meant to the highly intelligent and cultured high priests of the cults in their heyday. Don't ever accept information about a group from people who are extremely far removed from that group. In other words, let's say Protestant and Baptist people teaching you what the occult is. How can you possibly get the right answer from someone who's never practiced it before or knows nothing about it? Imagine me trying to tell you about the good and evil of football. I might can name two football teams, but I'm trying to teach you about football. Always be aware of who's teaching you what. So I'll read that again. We should not, therefore, regard the pagan pantheons as so many aberrations of the human mind, nor should we try to understand them from the viewpoint of the uninstructed and the uninitiated. We should try to find out what they must have meant to the highly intelligent and cultured high priests of the cults in their heyday. Compare Madam David Neal and W.B. Seabrook. That can't be Madam, is it? MME? Usually that's Madam. Anyway, compare Madam David Neal and W.B. Seabrook on the subject of heathen rites with the reports of the average missionary. Seabrook shows us the spiritual significance of voodoo, and Madam David Neal shows us the metaphysical aspect of Tibetan magic. These things appear in one way to the sympathetic observer who wins the confidence of the exponents of these systems and succeeds in being received into their holy of holies as a friend, and who goes to learn instead of merely to observe and ridicule, and in another way, to the beef fed zealot who walks into the holy place in his dirty boots and gets stoned by the indignant worshippers. 8. In judging these things, let us consider the form Christianity would present if approached in the same way. Unsympathetic observers would probably conclude that we worshipped a sheep and a Holy Ghost would yield some spectacular interpretations. Let us credit other people with using metaphors if we do not expect to be taken literally ourselves. That's some good advice. The outer form of the ancient pagan faiths is no cruder than Christianity in backward Latin countries, where Jesus Christ is represented in topper and tails, and the Virgin Mary in lace edged pantaloons. The inner form of the ancient faiths can compare very favorably with the best of our modern metaphysicians. After all, they produced Plato and Plotinus. The human mind does not change, and what is true of ourselves is probably true of the pagans. The Lamb of God, which taketh away the sins of the world, is only another version of the Bull of Mithra, who does the same thing. The only difference being that the ancient initiate was literally washed in blood, and the modern one takes it metaphorically. Out your temps, out your moors. Oh, thank you very much, Curve. That answers my confusion. Full name Alexandra David Neal. Madam David. Okay, because see, I thought the David was the first name. Cool. See, had to go for the principles first. I knew that MME was Madam, so hey, stick with it. Maybe they were on some 2024 stuff. I don't know. It's like rain on your wedding day. Cosmic Puzzle Piece says it's like she's trying to convince the reader to be more authentic in the practice of a magical lifestyle and stay true to the principles. Yeah, it's almost like she's laying down a solid foundation of how to think about this stuff. Who would have thought it figures? Uh oh. Are we entering a new era of 90s music? I hope not. 9. If we approach those whom we elect to call pagans, both ancient and modern, in a reverent and sympathetic spirit, knowing that Allah and Brahma and Amun Ra are but other names for that which we worship as God, we shall learn a very great deal that was forgotten in Europe when the Gnosis was stamped out and its literature destroyed. Isn't it funny whenever you say things like Allah and God and Amen and Brahma, they're all the same deity? No, they're not. It can't be. 10. We shall find, however, pages. Be still. We shall find, however, that the pagan faith presents their teaching in a form that is not readily assimilable by the European mind, and that if we are to arrive at its significance, we must restate it in our own terms. We must correlate the metaphysical concept with the pagan symbol. Then we shall be able to apply to the former, the vast mass of mystical experiences which generations of contemplatives and experimental psychologists have organized about the latter. And when we speak of experimental psychologists, we must not make the mistake of thinking that they are an exclusively modern product, because the priests of the ancient mysteries, with their temple sleep and deliberately induced hypnagogic visions, were nothing more or less than experimental psychologists. Though their art has been lost, like many others of the ancient arts, and is only being laboriously recovered piecemeal in the more advanced circles of scientific thought. So, look, these older traditions, these older religions and practices and whatnot, they have a deep vault, right? An extreme wealth of knowledge and experience. And if you could but connect those symbols with modern symbols, with something that corresponds in your today life. See, this is why you build your library of correspondences, because once you start accumulating these symbols and organizing them correctly, you can start linking them to symbols that have a vast wealth of knowledge already stacked up within it. Hmm. Mike's art says concepts, forms that represent the creator. Framestar says, "Have you ever considered the genius of the '80s track by Tiffany? I think we're alone now." Yeah, yeah. Think about this title for a sec. Wait a minute. I think we're alone now. Hmm. All right, I'm gonna put that on a playlist, Flamestar. I remember listening to it recently, probably by your recommendation. I remember listening to that recently. I'll put that on the playlist. That's like when she was performing in the mall or something like that, the music video. I feel like I've seen it like not long ago. Yeah, I remember. Nice. Okay, let's keep going. Experimental psychologists, right? That's really what we're doing. Experimental psychology. 11. The method used by the modern initiate for interpreting the language spoken by the ancient myths is a very simple and effectual one. He finds the Kabbalistic tree of life He finds in the Kabbalistic tree of life a link between the highly stylistic pagan systems and his own more rational methods. Right? You find a link between the past and the present. The Jew, Asiatic by blood and monotheistic by religion, has a foot in both worlds. Upon the tree of life with its 10 holy Sephiroth, the modern occultist bases both a metaphysic and a magic. He uses a philosophical conception of the tree to interpret what it represents to his conscious mind, and he uses a magical and ceremonial application of its symbolism to link it up with his subconscious mind. You see those two? Let's read it again. He uses a philosophical connection of the tree, the philosophy. You read the books, you study, you contemplate it, to interpret what it represents to his conscious mind. That's part of the science. That's not even the big part of the science. Here's the big part of the science. And he uses a magical and ceremonial application of its symbolism to link it up with his subconscious mind. You got to build your library of correspondences. You got to do these rituals, these meditations, these visuals. That's what I was thinking. How can we be alone if we suggest people being together? Right, right. Yeah, I've got to listen to the rest to see what the rest of the lyrics are about. The initiate, consequently, makes the best of both worlds, ancient and modern. For the modern world is all surface consciousness and has forgotten and repressed the subconsciousness to its own great hurt. And the ancient world was mainly subconsciousness, consciousness having been but recently evolved. When the two are linked up and brought into polarized function, they yield superconsciousness, which is the goal of the initiate. That's why I like to keep it dark. Remember, doing the work is not merely reading books. Doing the work is building up your subconscious mind, linking those symbols with concepts that you can understand, linking all that abstract, magical, hot stuff with what's already in your mind and what you already have grasp of. Got to link it together. What does Mercury in retrograde mean? Like, what does it mean? Not what is not give me a definition from a website. What is the experience in your life of a Mercury retrograde? Right? What's the experience in your life of a 30-second path of a Bina? What's the experience in your life of a, like, how can you connect your life? I've said this before so many times. How can you connect your life experience with the concept that is being described? Because the concept being described is a vault of experience and data, right? Deep vault. And your key to open that vault is to have your own experience. Because when you can use your experience to open up that lock, now you can look at that experience you had so much deeper because it's not just your experience anymore. You found the cosmic essence of the experience. You can take it home. That's why I said that the tree of life, the spheres represent 10 cabinets, 10 drawers, 10 dressers that you open up, and you should be able to put your experiences in each drawer. And when you look back in that drawer, you'll see all the experiences that your mind can grasp. I mean, technically, the same goes for the 22 paths as well. But to have everything organized means that you can now shift and move things around. You can balance, you can adjust. What did you say earlier about your astrology being a prescription, excuse me, being a diagnosis? Well, now you know where to get the prescription. I said, build your library of correspondences. Think about a library. A library has different sections and different shelves, and it's in order: subject order, alphabetical order, fiction, nonfiction. There's an order to it. Come on now. Are we finished or are we done? I ain't got no more talk in me. Did you pull up on Trick Daddy like that? Pull it up on you, nigga. I'm just the radio guy. Don't act tough with the radio guy. Don't act tough with the radio guy. Grand opening, grand closing. What about all my notes? Modern world, full of surface consciousness. The ancient world, full of the subconscious. When the two are brought together, linked up, and polarized, they yield superconsciousness, which, by the way, is the goal of the initiate. 12. Holding the foregoing conceptions in mind, let us now try to coordinate the ancient pantheons with the spheres upon the tree of life. So here we should start to getting to answer your question, Oath, where you asked if the gods were the fruit of the tree. Let's see what the fantastic Dion Fortune has to say. There are 10 such spheres, the 10 holy Sephiroth, and between these we must distribute, according to type, the different gods and goddesses of whatever pantheon we wish to study. We are then in a position to interpret their significance in the light of what we already know concerning the principles represented by the tree, and to add to our knowledge of the tree all that is available concerning the significance of the ancient deities. Look, if you're kind of new to this, circle that. Verse 12. This is how you build your library of correspondences and attribute it to the tree. This is how you do it. You interpret their significance in the light of what you already know concerning the principles represented by the tree, and you add your knowledge of the tree, add to your knowledge of the tree all that's available concerning the significance of whatever it is that you're working with. 13. This is obviously of great intellectual value, but there is another value which does not so readily appear to the average man who has had no experience of mystery workings, right? The muggle. The performance of a ceremonial rite symbolically representing the working of the force personified as a god has a very marked and even drastic effect on the subconscious mind of any person who is at all susceptible to psychic influences. So if you're walking out and about and you see this feather floating in front of you and there's no trees or anything, you see this feather and you turn around to catch the feather, and all of a sudden you miss a car accident that happens where you were going to walk, all of a sudden you're like, wow, an angel came down and saved me, right? Now that is imprinted on your subconscious mind. Even if afterwards you're like, no, it was just a coincidence. I guess a bird was flying over and I happened, no matter how much you logically explain it and try to dumb it down, that imprint is still there, right? You're going to think about it when you're laying in bed or in the shower or some off moment. This is what ritual does when we work with these gods, these goddesses. We have an experience, right? We get a flash of insight, a download, we get some kind of symbol, something happens. And we know for a split second, wow, I connected, I tapped in, this is real, even if you try to explain it away. But this is how we grow stronger in our faith and our ability to manipulate reality with thought by accepting these experiences at face value as they are. It doesn't matter if it was God or not. It doesn't matter if it was an angel or not. It doesn't matter. Just accept that the experience happened. The ancients had brought these rites to a very high pitch of perfection. And when we moderns are trying to reconstruct the lost art of practical magic, we can go to them with great profit. The whole philosophy of European magic is based upon the tree, and no one can hope to understand it or use it intelligibly who has not been trained in the Kabbalistic methods. It is this lack of training which makes popular occultism so very apt to degenerate into the crudest superstition. Your number is your name becomes a different thing when we understand the mathematical Kabbalah. Fortunes and teacups are another matter when we understand the significance of the magical images and the method of their formulation and interpretation as a psychological device for penetrating the veil of the unconscious. Alashi Eternal says, like, when I seen the word eagle on the side of a truck and seen an eagle later that day. Yes, that's what I'm talking about, right? Just accept those experiences. Like, don't try to explain it away. Don't try to normalize it and water it down. Oh, well, it was just a coincidence, and technically by the Pythagorean theorem of it. Like, don't do any of that. Just accept it and keep it moving. And you're gonna find that because what you're doing is you're resisting it when you try to explain it away. When you lower that resistance, you're going to welcome it more and more as a byproduct. So these experiences are going to ramp up. Like right now, looking at my phone, 11:01. Every time I look at this phone, there's repeating numbers. But I don't sit there and try to say, oh, well, technically, I guess my subconscious mind is true. It doesn't matter why. What matters is that it's happening. All these experiences don't necessarily have like this answer for you. If if nothing else, it's showing you that you're open to these glimpses of unity between the subconscious and the conscious. these glimpses, these moments where those two streams path, cross, connect. And as you stop resisting it, it begins to happen more. 'Cause I need you more and more. 'Cause you are my joy, joy, joy. Got me feeling. Rene Cordes, peace, peace. Kurt says that's why being a child is important. Absolutely. Because you better believe a child does not sit here and try to rationalize it. They enjoy the experience and keep it moving. Keep it moving. And this is also a clue why you can't like force anybody else into this understanding. Because most other people, they have to rationalize it. They have to sit there and explain it away. Because what they're doing is they're allowing their ego to do its job. The ego's job is to block the subconscious mind. You've heard Panic say that, right? We've all heard Panic say that 100 times. The ego is this bodyguard, this bouncer, this cock block, right? The ego, its job is to keep that barrier in place so that the conscious mind does not glimpse into the subconscious mind. And that's what everyone else is doing, right? The regular folks, when they have a magical, mystical experience, since they identify strongly with the ego, they allow the ego to say, you know what, that wasn't real. It was swamp gas. It was a weather balloon. And that's why people are so eager and easy to accept any old answer that authority gives them. Oh, well, those were just some fireworks. This wasn't actually a UFO. It was a weather balloon that kind of got out of control. Oh, okay, good, good, because I was looking for an explanation. So, forces and teacups are another matter when we understand the significance of the magical images and the method of their their method of their formulation and interpretation as a psychological device for penetrating the veil of the unconscious. 14. Broadly speaking, then, we sort out the gods and goddesses of all the pagan pantheons into the 10 pigeonholes of the 10 holy Sephiroth, relying chiefly upon their astrological associations to guide us, because astrology is the one universal language. For all people see the same planets. Space is referred to Kether. Ah, you see that? Space is referred to Kether, the zodiac to Hakma, the seven planets to the next seven Sephiroth, and Earth to Malkuth. Did you know that? So Kether is space, Hakma is the zodiac, Bina is Saturn, Chesed is Jupiter, Gebra is Mars, Tifreth is the Sun, Netzach is Venus, Hod is Mercury, Yesod is the Moon, and Earth is Malkuth. Explanation gives solace, but freezes the mind. Exactly. Ego, stop it. I'm trying to make cosmic love every freaking night and every freaking day. Freaking. Freaking. Every freaking way. Consequently, any god who has an analogy with Saturn will be referred to Bina. You see how that works? Any god who has an analogy with Saturn will be referred to Bina, as will any goddess who might be termed the primordial mother, the superior Eve, as distinguished from the inferior Eve, the bride of Microprosopus, Malkuth. The supernal triangle of Kether, Hokmah, and Bina always refers to the old gods. which every pantheon recognizes as the predecessors of those forms of Godhead worshipped by the current faith. Thus, Rhea and Kronos would be referred to Bina and Hakma. Interesting to have Rhea, the female, associated with Hakma, and Kronos, the male, associated with Bina, and Jupiter to Chesed. All the corn goddesses refer to Malkuth, and the lunar goddesses to Yesod. The war gods and destructive gods, including Kali, or divine devils, refer to Gibera, and the goddesses of love to Netzach. The initiator gods of wisdom are referred to Hod, and the sacrificed gods of and redeemers to Tifereth. So great an authority as Richard Payne Knight, in his valuable book, The Symbolic Language of Ancient Art and Mythology, speaks of the remarkable concurrence of these allegories, symbols, and titles of ancient mythology in favor of the mystic system of emanations. With this clue, we sort out the pantheons, thus enabling ourselves to compare like with like and make the one illuminate the other. So there it was, oath. Every freaking night and every freaking day. Every freaking way. Mike Sart says, did a visualization today to an entity. Set my intention. Entity did something to my root chakra. Then wife gave me a suggestion that corresponds with my intention because I felt a bit hesitant. I knew what time it was. Right, right. Imagine, right? You go within, you do your work, you stir the astral plane, you stir up the etheric plane, and then you get a response in the physical plane. That's the only way that it can happen, right? We don't get fire coming down from the heavens. We don't get ghouls and goblins popping up in the middle of the night. You get your family members, your co-workers, the crackhead across the street. Some physical vessel that's already here will express the energy, whoever's the best channel for it. 15. In the system he gives in his book of correspondences 777, Crowley assigns the gods to the paths as well as to the Sephiroth. This, in my opinion, is a mistake and leads to confusion. It is the Sephiroth alone that represent natural forces. The paths are states of consciousness. The Sephiroth are objective, and the paths are subjective. It is for this reason that in the working glyph of the tree used by initiates, the Sephiroth are always represented in one color scale and the paths in another. Those who possess this glyph will know to what I refer. Those who know, right? So one color scale is going to deal with the objective experience, one color scale is going to deal with the subjective experience. Hey, 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 Frater Quentin, peace and greetings. Don Tree, peace, peace. Hey, what time is it, man? What time is it? Somebody on the East Coast, let me know what time it is. Thanks, Travis Mages. 11:11. Hey, 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 hey. What must I do to show how much I think about freaking you? And what would that change, Jonas? If you were able to show how much you think about freaking that person, like what would that accomplish? What would that accomplish? So now you've just told the person how much you think about freaking them. Now what? What is it? What has changed? What must I say? What must I do to show how much I think about freaking you? Curve says they might have gotten scared. I mean, that's what it sounds like. That's what I would think. In my experience, that's what happened. Yeah, every freaking night and every freaking day. Every time I close my eyes, I wake up feeling so horny. That's how they kick the song. That's how they kick the song on. Man, I love that group, man. I love it. Alkalinity Delight says, so what does a soulmate or soul tie mean if on the etheric plane I can only physically see? Well, since you're asking me, I'm just going to tell you how I see it, man. I don't subscribe to the whole soulmate, soul tie thing. Now, there might be like a small 1 to 5, maybe 10% that have that experience happens with, but I don't think that that's something that happens to most people. I'm open to being wrong, but I don't really subscribe to the what do you call it, twin flame soulmate thing. Poison Polished Nail says if you sing it, it doesn't sound so stalkerish. Yes, yes, it's about the delivery, right? The delivery and what the person looks like, apparently. So Jodeci could get away with it because they were famous. All right, let's wrap this particular chapter up. Every time I close my eyes, damn son, every single time, said every creature with a penis ever born on planet Earth. It's not a personal thing. It's that's what comes with being in Prakriti. That's what comes with being in a physical body. It's not magical or special. Let's get back to the text, man. Get back to the text. 16. The paths themselves, in my opinion, should be regarded as under the direct presidency of the holy names, governing their Sephirotic attributions only, and should not be confused with other pantheons. For although we may go to other systems for intellectual enlightenment, we are unwise to attempt to mix the methods of practical working and unfoldment of consciousness. For instance, the 17th path between Tifereth and Bina is assigned by the Sefer Yetzirah to the element of air. We are far wiser to work it with the right of the element of air and the holy names assigned thereto, and to approach it through the appropriate tattva. Ooh. She just threw that word in there like we supposed to know what a tattva is. Hmm. Lucky for you all, your teacher has well schooled you on what tattvas are, rather than confuse the issue with the associations of the assorted collection of deities. Castor and Pollux, twins, right? Janus, Two Face, right? Apollo, Murti, and other incompatibles assigned to it by Crowley, whose correspondences present an inextricable tangle of associations. Who knows what tarot card is representative of the 17th path between Tifereth and Bina? Castor and Pollux should be a clue. 18, by the way, 17, that was in the 17th verse. Here's a mystery that I haven't cracked yet, by the way. I believe that she's got a method to these verses. Like, I don't think she's just doing this because. I think that there's some kind of method to this. I don't know if it's numerological. I don't know if they relate to the paths or whatever. There's something to the verses, bro. I haven't figured it out yet, but I will figure it out. I don't know if y'all see it too, but just pay attention. As we go through the verses, there's some kind of pattern to it. Wow. Of course. Oh no, we are not getting infected with the 17 thing. I know the 333 thing was contagious. I passed on that to a bunch of people, but we're not doing that with no 17. December 7th, 11:17, 17th verse, 17th path, 18. The Sephiroth should be interpreted macrocosmically, and the paths microcosmically. Thus, we shall find the clue to the tree in both man and nature. Hmm. Interesting. Interesting. So that was chapters 10, 11, and 12. Every time I close my eyes. Yeah, I think 13 might be a little bit thick. What is that? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 pages. Dang. I don't know. Maybe we should because that's the last chapter in part one. Mm, what do y'all think? Should we should we go one more, or should we wrap it up here? Because we could always do chapter 13 on Monday or Tuesday. 3 chapters in 2.5 hours is really good, but this next chapter is about 11 pages, so that might take another hour and a half, maybe. Every time I close my eyes. I don't give a damn about nothing else. Freaking you is all I see. Delicious. All right, now, all y'all saying one more, let's go, let's go. Y'all better be here for the whole 11 pages. I don't want to see no tap outs after 2 paragraphs. Tonight, you got my body. Tonight, you got my time. Whatever you want, whatever you need. Tonight, you won't be sorry. You won't be sorry. Peace, WT. WT says, I'm tapping out now. Got traveling to do tomorrow. Peace, chat. Trav. Peace, peace. What must I say? All right, here we go. Chapter 13. Mm. 1. If among the readers who have followed these studies in the Kabbalah thus far, there are any of the more advanced students of Western occultism, they will no doubt have found much more that is familiar than is new or original. In working upon this storehouse of ancient knowledge, we are in the position of excavators working on the site of a buried temple. We are digging up fragments rather than studying a coherent system. For the system, though coherent enough in its heyday, was broken and scattered and defaced by the persecutions of 20 centuries of unenlightened bigotry and spiritual jealousy. That's what you're up against. That's where we're at. Two. More work has been done upon these scattered fragments than is generally realized. However, Madame Blavatsky gathered together a great mass of data and exposed it to the gaze of a public which understood it little better than the child gazing at the cases in a museum and marveling at the queer things they contain. The scholarly work of G.R.S. Mead has given us much information concerning the Gnosis, the esoteric tradition of the Western world during the earlier centuries of our epoch. Miss Atwood's monumental book has revealed the significance of the alchemical symbolism to us. None of these, however, have expounded the Western tradition as initiates of that tradition, but have approached it from outside and either pieced together its fragments or, as in the case of Madame Blavatsky, interpreted it by analogy in the light of the more familiar system of another tradition. Those who approached the study of the subject from the inside, that is to say, with the initiatory keys, and employed it as a practical system for the exaltation of consciousness have, for the most part, maintained a secrecy, which, though it might have not been though it might have been not only justifiable and even essential in the days when the Holy Inquisition rewarded such researches with the stake, it is difficult to assign to any more creditable motive in our liberal age than a desire to create and maintain prestige. A very effectual corner in occult practice, if not in occult knowledge, has been established and maintained among English speaking peoples for the last quarter of a century. A corner that effectually defeated the spiritual impulse, which should have given rise to a renaissance of the mysteries during the last quarter of the last century. Consequently, the earth being ripe for the sowing and the wheat not being broadcast therein, the four winds brought strange seeds to the waiting ground, and a tropical growth sprang up that, having no roots in racial tradition, withered away or developed strange forms. The very temple of our native, wow, think about that, like seeds coming over to America and not finding solid, firm soil, no roots in the people. So it either died or developed strange forms. That's a nice metaphor. Four, the buried temple of our native tradition has, in actuality, been excavated in part at any rate, but the rescued fragments have not been made available for students according to the honorable traditions of European scholarship, but have been gathered together into private collections, the keys whereof have rested in the pockets of individuals who have opened and closed the doors in an entirely arbitrary fashion. I have no doubt these pages will cause heartburnings in certain quarters whose private collections they depreciate in value. But I have no doubt also that the innumerable students who essayed the Western path in vain may find in these pages the keys to what was incomprehensible to them in the method, or perhaps to be more accurate, the complete lack of method in which they were trained. Speaking for myself, it took me 10 years' work in the dark before I found the keys, and I only found these in the end because I was sufficiently psychic to pick up the inner plane contacts. I find it difficult to believe that any useful purpose is served by deliberately darkening counsel or by withholding from the student keys and explanations that are essential to his work. If the student is unworthy to be trained, do not let us train him. If he is to be trained at all, let us train him properly. That's a bar right there, ain't it? If the student is not worthy to be trained, then don't train him. But if he is worthy, train him all the way. There's no point in hiding and holding and keeping stuff a secret that's essential for growth. Makes sense. 5. In the following pages, I have done my best to elucidate the principles governing the use of magical symbolism. The practical use of the ceremonial method is best attempted under the guidance of one who is already experienced in its use. To work alone or with equally inexperienced comrades is to run unnecessary risks. But there is no reason why anyone should not experiment with the meditative method. 6. In order to use the magical symbols effectually, one has to make the contact of each individual symbol. Peace, Kashigi. It is of little use to make a list of symbols and proceed to the construction of a ritual. In magic, as in violin playing, one has to make one's notes. One does not find them ready made as on the piano. The student of the violin has to learn to make each individual note before he can play. Before he can play an air. So it is with any occult operation. We must know how to construct and contact the magical images before we can work with them. Powerful verse, you better circle it or highlight it. Because look, you can go online and say, like, oh, I need a money spell. And you look online and somebody tells you, get this, 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 and this, put it in a bag, put it in a jar, then do that. I mean, you can do that. But what we're missing is that that person talking, giving them the benefit of the doubt, they have made the connections within their library of correspondences with those items and what they represent, what they symbolize, right? So when they do the ritual, it hits different for them because they already made their notes, so to speak. You see, like on a piano or a keyboard, the notes are evenly spaced out and you can just hit C, D, A. You can hit it just by looking at it. With a violin, you got to learn where they are. And that's when you practice, you start to not even intuitively, second nature, right? You automatically know where to put your hand, your fingers to make certain notes. And that's what it is like with magic and these symbols and rituals. Perhaps the ritual didn't work because you don't have any connection with the materials you did the ritual with. Maybe you were just following somebody's instruction on the internet without actually making contact or connection with the ingredients and the tools. Yeah, what color candle do I use, Trav? Well, what does it matter? Because you don't know the difference. What color candle do I use? What does it matter if you don't know the difference? Get a white candle and call it a day. But if you know from experience what the red represents, not from Google search, but from actually doing it and getting a matching result. Think about that. If you do rituals, if you do candle magic, right? Let's say you study candle magic from, say, what's his name? Philip Cooper or whoever, and you start getting results with this candle magic. You now know from experience, no one can take it away from you. A purple candle does this, black candle does that, white candle does that. So now when you have this ritual to put together, you're doing it with a knowledge of what each piece represents. But if you just tell somebody, hey, you're gonna have to use a black candle and get some roses and da 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 da, none of those items mean anything to them. Now that's something that maybe somebody don't want to hear because you probably went online and purchased the voodoo kit, right? The Mojo money spell kit that has all the little oils and herbs and stuff you need to do it. But maybe that's why the affirmations don't work for you, huh? Because you didn't come up with them words. They don't mean anything to you. It just sounds good. I digress. Look over at verse number 6 in chapter 13 and see if you can't pull something out. 7. The sets of symbols associated with each of the 32 paths are used by the initiate to build up the magical images. It is necessary that he should know these symbols not only in theory but also in practice. All right? That's what we said. That's what we said. That is to say, he must not only have them thoroughly well rooted in his memory, but must also have performed meditations upon them individually until he has penetrated their significance and experienced the force they represent. To know the vast range of symbols associated with each path is, of course, the work of a lifetime. But the student must learn the key symbols of each path as the essential preliminary to his studies. He is then able to recognize all other symbol forms as they come his way and assign them to their proper classification. His knowledge will thus develop under two aspects. Firstly, the knowledge of the symbolism and its infinite ramifications. And secondly, the philosophy of the interpretation of that symbolism. You picking up what she's putting down here? She's literally telling you how to do this, how to build up your library of correspondences, how to connect the conscious mind to the subconscious mind, how to connect these things to the tree. She's breaking it down here before she actually gets into it. Once he has mastered a working knowledge of the concepts of esoteric cosmogony and has the general scheme of symbolism assigned to each Sephiroth well fixed in his memory, right? Well fixed. You don't have to go back and check anymore because you understand. The student is equipped with a card index system and can commence filing, collecting the material for his files from every imaginable source in archaeology, folklore, mystical religion, travelers' tales, and the speculations of ancient and modern philosophy and ultra modern science. 8. The uninitiated inquirer may wonder how the enormous mass of data is kept sorted in the memory. To begin with, the serious student who uses the tree as his meditation method works at it regularly every day. Hmm. You heard what she said. Look at that. Study and show thyself approved. Big facts. She says to begin with, the serious student who uses the tree as his meditation method works at it regularly every day. If you're doing it every day, is that not a lifestyle? Moreover, it will be found by experience that the assignation of symbols to each Sephiroth has a peculiar logical basis, hidden somewhere deep in the subconscious mind, and the symbol sequences are not nearly so difficult to remember as might be supposed, especially if they have been used for meditation. Some of the symbols refer to the concepts of esoteric philosophy, some to the methods of projecting consciousness in vision, and some to the composing of ceremonial. The student must remember, however, that the symbols will never yield their significance to conscious meditation alone. The symbols will never yield their significance to conscious meditation alone. However correctly and completely they are known, they must be used as the initiates intended them to be used to evoke images from the subconscious mind into conscious content. You got to think about that until the thinking is no longer what's thinking. AZW Beast. Lord have mercy. 9. One set of symbols is assigned to the 10 holy Sephiroth themselves, and another to the 22 paths that connect them. Some of the symbols, however, occur in both sets, and all of them interconnect through their astrological and numerical correlations. This sounds most perplexingly complex, but in actual practice, it is far simpler than it sounds. Because the work is not done with the conscious mind, but with the subconscious mind. And it matters very little in what manner the symbols are pitchforked into it. The strange demon that sits behind the sensor sorts them out, picking that which it requires and rejecting all else until finally a coherent pattern reappears in consciousness that only requires analysis to yield its significance after the same manner as a dream. Look, this is the last chapter in the first part, and she's really laying it on thick. If you don't get it now, maybe you'll get it on the next time you read this book, which hopefully will be in this lifetime. 10. A vision evoked by the use of the tree is, in fact, an artificially produced waking dream, deliberately motivated and consciously related to some chosen subject whereby not only the subconscious content, but also the superconscious perceptions are evoked and rendered intelligible to consciousness. In a spontaneous dream, the symbols are drawn at random from experience. In the Kabbalistic vision, however, the picture is evoked from a limited set of symbols to which consciousness is rigidly restricted by a highly trained habit of concentration. It is this peculiar power to turn the mind loose within determined limits, which constitutes the technique of occult meditation. She just told you what occult meditation was. One more time, in case you missed it. In a spontaneous dream, the symbols are drawn at random from experience. So, in a spontaneous dream, you're literally just getting random symbols that mean random things. But check this out. In the Kabbalistic vision, however, the picture is evoked from a limited set of symbols to which consciousness is rigidly restricted by a highly trained habit of concentration. It is this peculiar power to turn the mind loose within determined limits, which constitutes the technique of occult meditation, and it is only to be acquired by constant practice over a considerable period. It is this which constitutes the difference between the trained and the untrained occultist. The untrained person may be able to detach consciousness from the control of the directing personality and thus allow the images to rise, but he has no power to restrict and select what shall appear, and consequently, anything may appear, including a varying proportion of subconscious content. The trained occultist, however, accustomed to use this method in his meditations, is able to swing instantly clear of the normal subconscious content unless it is disturbed by emotion, in which case he is liable to be entangled in its meshes. But even in this case, his method is his protection. His method is his protection. For he is immediately able to recognize confused symbolism in the images because he has a definite standard of comparison with which to compare them. In studying the tree, the student should always think of each Sephiroth under the threefold aspect we have already mentioned of philosophy, psychism, and magic. To this end, he should always think of it firstly as representing a certain factor in the evolution of the cosmos, in the immemorial past of cosmic time, whether it remains in manifestation, has passed away, or has not yet arrived at the level of dense matter. It hasn't yet arrived at the level of dense matter. Something crazy is on the way, ain't it? Gotta think, man. AI is still in its fetus stage. Lovely. 12. With this aspect of the tree are also taken the curious cryptic texts of the Sefer Yetzirah. K. Harris says, wait, can you run that back? Dense matter. Sure, let's look at number 11, right? So in verse 10, she was talking about how the trained occultist is able to go into trance, right? Just like the untrained occultist is able to go in trance. But the untrained occultist, when you go into trance, you're going to be dealing with the images that pop up. The trained occultist literally sets, they create a paradigm, they create a matrix, they create a limitation of what they're going to be having appear, right? So, in other words, I'm going to go into trance, but I'm going to focus on the lover's tarot card. And I'm only going to allow associated correspondences to come through in my trance, right? I'm going to limit my trance to correspondences of that 17th path of the lover's card. And that is the language, the dialogue of that path. If each path was a living spirit, its language that it communicates to you with are the correspondences that you've gathered in your library for that symbol. Now it's starting to become clear as to why I keep saying build your library of correspondences. So in studying the tree, the student should always think of each Sephiroth under the threefold aspect we've already mentioned, right? So no matter which Sephiroth, Ketharon, Nona, Malkuth, think of it in the philosophical term, the psychic term, and the magical term. To this end, he should always think of it firstly as representing a certain factor in the evolution of the cosmos in the immemorial past of cosmic time. So let's say, for example, if you're thinking about Gibera or Bina, think about Bina representing this concept, right? This concept that has helped to evolve the cosmos in the way, way, way past, right? Next, think of it, well, she says, whether it remains in manifestation, has passed away, or has not yet arrived at the level of dense matter. So if we're thinking about Bina in time immemorial, in the deep, deep, distant past, think about the expressions of that force upon evolution, all the expressions of that force upon evolution. Whether those expressions are still here, right? Because look, all the 10 Sephiroth represent concepts that have shaped existence. Now, some of the things that have gone through the process of that shaping are no longer with us, right? Even we know about extinct animals and extinct practices. There have been so many different races of people walking this planet that are gone, all traces wiped away. There have been creatures and animals and plants and rocks and all sorts of things that have been wiped away completely. They are lost in the clip off. So there's even correspondences of Saturn that we'll never know. There's correspondences of Tifereth that we'll never know. There's correspondences of all these different energies that are no longer in existence. So what she's saying is really stretch your mind past what your personal immediate existence is showing you. We good? So yeah, to this end, he should always think of it firstly as representing a certain factor in the evolution of the cosmos in the immemorial past of cosmic time, whether it remains in manifestation, has passed away, or has not yet arrived at the level of dense matter. So also, there's some expressions of Bina or whatever that haven't even arrived yet. That's on the way, right? There's things that we will never see because they ain't here yet. And there's things that we'll never see because they are long gone. There's diseases and creatures and inventions and methods and all sorts of things that are on their way. I mean, everything that we do today is a part of the springboard of tomorrow. So me doing these book studies on Saturday nights, this is starting something new that I can't even imagine. Who knows what people will do 30 years from now, inspired by this, for better or for worse. Dion Fortune didn't know about me, right? She didn't know about me. Yet here I am doing this, reading her text, her book. She didn't know that her book was going to be on YouTube, being read a couple chapters at a time every week to a bunch of people who I'll never meet, who will never meet me. Like she wouldn't have even fathomed that, right? Yet that whole process, you could even put it under the Sephiroth of Hod, the initiator, the teacher, the scholar, right? We could put this whole process that I named between her writing the book to me reading it to you receiving it. That those are all expressions of the Hod force. But see, Hod is not me, it's not her, it's not this book. Hod is something that existed long before manifestation did. But we are all expressions of it. Like that's what she's saying in that verse. When you're tapping into these Sephiroth, you got to look way beyond the things that you know. You got to expand beyond your lifetime, beyond your culture. It won't take long, like really working real magic, it won't take long to start to loosen and release your identification with matter. It won't really take long because it's very easy to see the small box that we create around ourselves that we call life. And you start to expand past it. It's hard to identify with matter when you expand like that. But anyway, hope that made sense. 12. With this aspect of the tree are also taken the curious cryptic texts of the Sefer Yetzirah, one to each path. These most baffling utterances have a curious way of yielding sudden flashes of illumination to meditation, and are by no means to be rejected as rubbish, incomprehensible though they may appear at first sight. 13. Another source of illumination is to be found in the additional titles of the Sephiroth, each of which has anything from 1 to 2 or 3 dozen. These are graphic descriptive names applied to the various Sephiroth by the ancient rabbis and found scattered through the Kabbalistic literature. And they tell us a great many things. For instance, the titles Concealed of the Concealed and Primordial Point that are applied to Kether convey a good deal to those who know where to look for it. 14. We can also, once we are acquainted with the symbolism, assign the various Sephiroth to their equivalent gods in other systems. And when we look up the symbols, functions, cosmic concepts, and methods of worship assigned to these deities, we get a fresh flood of illumination. By the use of a good mythological dictionary or an encyclopedia, Fraser's Golden Bow and Madame Blavatsky's Secret Doctrine, and Isis Unveiled, we can, by the mere application of diligence, read a great many riddles that at first appeared insoluble. And the exercise is a fascinating one. When used thus, the tree is peculiarly valuable because its diagrammatic form causes things to be seen in relation to each other, thus causing them to throw light upon each other. 15. In order to manipulate the psychic aspect of the tree and its paths, the occultist uses images because it is by means of images and the names that evoke them that vision is formulated. I win. Peace. Name change. He associates with each Sephiroth a primary symbol, which is called its magical image. Secondly, he associates with it in his mind a geometrical form, which, in various ways, embodies its characteristics. And when he composes symbols, he uses that form as the basis. For instance, Gibera, Mars, the fifth Sephiroth, has assigned to it a pentagon or five-sided figure. Any symbol of Gibera, whether it be a talisman, an altar to Mars, or a mental picture of a symbol, would be in the form of a pentagon, colored in one of the colors of the Mars color scale. 16. The most important forms upon the tree, however, are those associated with the four names of power assigned to each Sephiroth. With these are associated four colors, in which they are conceived to manifest in a symbolic form in each of the four worlds of the Kabbalists. The highest of these is the God name, which manifests in Absolute, the plane of spirit, and is the supreme name of power of that Sephirotic sphere, and dominates all its aspects, whether cosmic, evolutionary, or subjective. It represents the idea underlying the development of manifestation in that sphere, the idea that runs through all subsequent evolution and expresses itself in all ensuing effects and manifestations. 17. The second name of power is that of the archangel of the sphere and represents the organized consciousness of the being through the activities of which the evolution of that phase was inaugurated and directed. Though etherealized, it must not be thought that life and consciousness as we know them in any way correspond to their nature. They are more akin, in essence, to natural forces. She's talking about the archangels, right? They're not people chilling with opinions, hopes and dreams, desires and pains. Hell, they're more like AI, to be honest. So, although these beings are represented pictorially as of human form, like we always draw them as humans with wings, though etherealized, it must not be thought that life and consciousness as we know them in any way correspond to their nature. They are more akin, in essence, to natural forces. Yet, if we consider them simply as unintelligent energy, we shall have no adequate concept of their nature, because they are essentially individualized, intelligent, and purposive. Both these ideas must enter into our concept, modifying each other, till finally we shall arrive at a realization that differs very widely from anything to which Western thought is accustomed. Yeah, see, these archangels are more like cosmic AI. They have specific functions, specific tasks, processes, and duties. The book Ladder of Lights goes into way more detail. James, Jeremiah, peace, 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 peace. Good to see you. 18. The third name of power denominates not one being, but a whole class of beings, the choirs of angels, as they are called by the rabbis. And these again represent intelligent, natural forces. So if you didn't notice, she's also going through the four worlds. right? The names of God, that's going to be the Atziluth. The Archangel, that's going to be the Bria. These angel class, this is going to be the Yetzirah. And then the mundane chakra, that's going to be the Asaya. 19. The fourth denominates what we have called the mundane chakra. That is to say, the celestial object which is looked upon as the product of the particular phase of evolution which took place under the presidency of that Sephiroth and which represents it. 20. The third aspect under which we consider the Sephiroth is the magical aspect and is essentially practical. Remember what I said about practical, right? The third aspect is essentially practical. To arrive at this, we think of what may be experienced under the presidency of these different aspects of deity manifestation, and what powers may be wielded by the magician when he has mastered their lessons. Framestar Films says, let's not forget or take for granted the magic of matter, as it is the manifestation of intent, the creative process cascading down the tree through the four worlds, the essence captured in form. Good point. Good point. Matter's not inherently evil. Matter's not bad. Matter's not something to be feared. Matter's the end product of the tree. It's not the soul. 21. Each Sephiroth has assigned to it a virtue, which represents its ideal aspect, the gift which it brings to evolution, and a vice, which is the result of the overplus of its qualities. For instance, Gibera Mars has for its virtues energy and courage, and for its vices, cruelty and destructiveness. The student of astrology will at once recognize that the virtues and vices attributed to the various Sephiroth are derived from the characteristics of the planets associated with them, and will find that in the correspondence, a whole new line of approach to astrology is opened up. 22. The spiritual experience, as I prefer to call it, or occult power, as Crowley calls it, is a profound realization or vision of some aspect of cosmic science. This constitutes the essence of the initiation of the grade assigned to each Sephirah. For in the greater mysteries of the West, the grades are associated with the Sephirah. Can I initiate myself in the tree? Absolutely. How do I know if I'm initiated? Well, she just told you in verse 23 of chapter 13. Excuse me, verse 22. Verse 23. The medieval Kabbalists are also assigned a part of the body to each Sephiroth, but this must not be taken too literally. The real key is to be found in the realization that the different Sephiroth represent factors in consciousness. And if we take Gibera as the strong right arm, we must realize that it really means the dynamic will, the executive capacity, the destruction of the effete and unbalanced. 24. Each Sephiroth and path has assigned to it symbolic animals, plants, and precious stones. It is necessary that the student should know these for two reasons. Firstly, they give some very important keys to the relations of the gods of different pantheons to the Sephiroth. And secondly, they form part of the symbolism of the astral paths and serve as landmarks when traveling in the spirit vision. For example, for instance, if one saw a horse, Mars, or a jackal, Luna, in the sphere of Netzach, Venus, one would know that there was confusion of plane and the vision was not reliable. In her sphere, one would expect to see her doves and a spotted beast such as a lynx or a leopard. Interesting, right? The collective unconscious has specific symbols that relate to specific experiences and areas on the tree. 25. It may be thought that the association of the symbolic beasts with the gods and goddesses in the old myths is entirely arbitrary and the fruit of the poetic imagination, which, like the wind, bloweth where it listeth. To this, the occultist answers that the poetic imagination is not an arbitrary thing and refers the skeptic to the works of Dr. Jung of Zurich, the famous psychiatrist, and to the essays of the Irish poet A.E., in particular, Song and Its Fountains, wherein he analyzes the nature of his own sources of inspiration, from the intrinsic nature of his poetry and from many passing references in his work. I think we may be entitled to claim AE as one of that band of students who have been nurtured on the mystical Qabalah. At any rate, what he has to say is sound Kabbalistic doctrine and extremely illuminating to our present argument. 26. Dr. Young has a great deal to say concerning the myth making faculty of the human mind, and the occultist knows it to be true. He knows also, however, that its implications are much farther reaching than psychology has yet suspected. The mind of poet or mystic, dwelling upon the great natural forces and factors of the manifested universe, has, by the creative use of imagination, penetrated far more deeply into their secret causes and springs of being than has the scientist. It is not for nothing that the racial imagination, working thus, has come to associate certain animals with certain gods. A brief examination of the examples cited serves to show the basis of the association. The doves of Venus show her gentler aspects, and the cat beasts her sinister beauty. Hmm. We can thank the artists and the poets, the visionaries, the ones who are actually tapped in now, not those who are doing it for a paycheck. We can thank them for continually adding to the storehouse of images. 27. The association of plants with different paths rests upon a twofold basis. Firstly, there are plants traditionally associated with the legends of the gods, as is corn with Ceres and the vine with Dionysus. Thus, we find association with the Sephiroth, with which the functions of the gods are correlated corn with Malkuth, and the vine with Tifereth, the Christ center, wherewith are associated all the sacrificed gods and givers of illumination. 28. Plants are also associated with the Sephiroth in another way. The old doctrine of signatures assigned various plants to the presidency of various planets in a somewhat erratic fashion. In some cases, there was a genuine association. In others, it was arbitrary and superstitious. Old Culpeper and other ancient herbalists gave a great deal to say on the subject, and some very interesting researches are being done on the anthroposophical experimental farms. 29. In a similar way, certain drugs are associated with the different Sephiroth. And here again, we need to distinguish the superstition from the mystical. The arbitrary attribution of drugs cannot always be justified by actual experiment, but we may safely say that whole classes of drugs could be regarded as under the presidency of certain Sephiroth, because they partake of the nature of certain modes of activity, which are classified under the Sephiroth. For instance, all aphrodisiacs could be justly assigned to Netzach, Venus, and all abortifacients to Yesod in her Hecate aspect, analgesics to Chesed, mercy, and irritants and caustics to Gibera, severity. 30. This opens up a very interesting aspect of the study of materia medica, the psychic and psychological aspect of drug activity. It was this aspect It was this aspect which was especially studied by the initiate physicians, such as Paracelsus, and it was the ignorant and superstitious abuse of this aspect by uninitiated physicians that led to the extraordinary aberrations of folk medicine. 31. The occultist knows that there is a psychological aspect to every psychological action and function. He also knows that it is possible powerfully to reinforce the action of all drugs by the appropriate mental action, and that certain chemically inert substances lend themselves effectually to the transmission and storing of mental activities, just as other substances are effectual conductors or insulators of electricity. Oh man, she's getting straight into it. Not too much metaphorical, right? She's getting straight into it. 32. This consideration brings us to the question of the association of certain precious stones and metals with the different Sephiroth, an association determined by both astrological and alchemical considerations. As is well known to psychics, crystalline substances, metals, and certain liquids are the best media for conveying or storing subtle forces. Color plays an important part in the visions induced by meditation on the various Sephiroth, and it is found by experience that a crystal of the appropriate color is the best material out of which to make a talisman. A blood red ruby for the fiery Martian forces of Gibera, an emerald for the green ray nature forces of Netzach. 33. Perfumes, especially incense, are also associated with the different Sephiroth, as has already been noted. Certain spiritual experiences and certain modes of consciousness are assigned to each sphere on the tree. It is well known that nothing induces states of mind or stimulus psychic consciousness more effectually than odors. Scents are surer than sights or sounds to make your heartstrings crack, says the most objective of poets, and the experience of practical occultists proves this to be true. There are certain aromatic substances associated by tradition with the different gods and goddesses, and these are most effectually potent to stimulate the mood which is in harmony with the function of that deity. 34. Magical weapons are also included in the long list of symbols and substances associated with each path. A magical weapon is an instrument of some sort which is used in the evocation of a particular force, or is the vehicle of its manifestation, such as the rod of the magician, or the bowl of water or crystal sphere of the seer. The assignation of the magical weapons to the paths tells us a good deal about the nature of the paths, because we can deduce therefrom the kind of power that operates in the particular sphere in question. Hmm. 35. I'd love to see a list of magical weapons associated with the paths. I don't think that's something that I've seen. The magical weapons associated with the paths. I need to find a list. Hmm. 35. As already noted, the various divinatory systems have their relations with the tree and find their subtlest clues therein. The associations of astrology are readily traced through the symbolism of the planets and elements and their triplicities, houses, and rulership. Geomancy links with the tree via astrology. And the tarot, the most satisfactory of all the systems of divination, rises from and finds its explanation in the tree and nowhere else. That may seem a dogmatic statement to the scholarly historian searching for traces of the origin of those mysterious cards, and may we add, most lamentably failing to find it. But when it is realized that the initiate works the tarot and the tree together, and that they dovetail into each other at every imaginable angle, it will be seen that such an array of correspondences could be neither arbitrary nor fortuitous. Yeah, weapons on the tree. I'm gonna have to look that up. But yeah, if you come across something, certainly send it my way. 36. A most interesting and important aspect of the practical work of the tree concerns the manner in which ceremonial and talismanic magic are used to compensate the findings of the divinatory sciences. Each prick symbol of geomancy, each card of the tarot, and each horoscopic factor have their places assigned to them on the path of the tree, and the occultist with the necessary knowledge can put together a ritual or design a talisman to compensate or reinforce each and any of these. Imagine that, huh? Imagine that you want to invoke a specific experience in your life, and you are able to locate which path or paths correspond with that experience you're looking for. And you take all the necessary symbols and correspondences and you create a ritual around it. Let's say you even learn the path working of that particular path, right? I don't know. Maybe I'm just throwing crazy ideas out there. Maybe I'm just putting crazy ideas out there. And as you can see, I didn't highlight it, so I must have missed this last time. 37. It is for this reason that divination by the uninitiated is apt to bring bad luck in its train, for it stirs the subtle forces by concentrating the mind upon them, without compensating that which is out of equilibrium by the appropriate magical effort. Effort. Imagine that. Imagine that manifestation is more than just chanting, I'm healthy, wealthy, and wise. Like, imagine if you could find the concepts behind the thing that you desire, right? You could find the correspondences, the symbols. You could find how it links up with, say, the tree or the tarot, and really put something together that you can work practically, right? You'll have the symbols to meditate on. You'll know what you're looking for. Remember, she talked earlier about how the trained occultist is able to go into trance and allow specific set of symbols to appear, right? And wouldn't that so which one is easier? Trying to close your eyes and meditate on a bunch of symbols that you read in a list on a book, or meditating on the symbols that you've put together through your travels and your experiences, right? You know that a unicorn and a white rose and white fur, you know these things represent a specific thing. Isn't it easier to envision those and allow it to come up during a trance versus trying to force something that you don't have in your library? Framestar Film says, hey Trev, how could you position your tarot reading on a broader perspective by locating the drawn cards onto their correct positions on the tree? Hmm. I think I kind of do that when I mention about what's the astrological significance behind the card. But I guess to be real intentional about that, hmm, I guess in order, you could see elementally, like if you get a five of wands, that will go first, right? Right, according to the different worlds and according to from, I guess, 0 to 10. Hmm. That's a good question. Let me think about that. Hmm. It's time to make some talismans. All right, so look, in these particular chapters that we've read tonight, even though she said she wasn't gonna give you practical Kabbalah, she did outline practical methods of how we do this thing. See, I told you, every Omnia Arlandria piece, I swear, you always show up at the very, very end. It's uncanny. Peace to you. Hope you're having a good night. Hey, you made it though. Yeah, so throughout these past four chapters, she's given specific practical things you can do. I think one of the big takeaways was limiting your visualizations to the specific uh, symbolisms you're working on. Hmm. Goodness gracious. Okay, okay. You said, or the drawn cards of a reading to construct a path working meditation. Nice. 22, 22. That's where we at with it. All right, everybody. So that was the end of part one. The end of part one. She really had to lay it down, build this foundation for you, tell you about where Kabbalah is coming from, giving an outline really on how to think about this thing, giving you more clues as to the fountainhead from which your tradition springs. Type stuff, as the young folks say. Type ish. So, what happens next? Where do we go from here? Okay, general considerations. I don't think that chapter is very long at all. Okay, yeah, now she's really breaking down. Then we get right to it. So, we're getting right to it next time. Getting right to it next time. Kether. We're going to be talking about Kether, the first Sephiroth, and all the correspondences and all that good stuff. So, get ready, get ready, get ready. That's what time it is. That's what time it is. Okie doke. Peace, peace. All right, so tune in next time, right? Brimstar Film says, when are the elemental course details being released again, Trev? Very soon. I would say probably within the next week or so. We're going to be starting the next session this month. But yeah, really, I'm just going to rework the page just a little bit. And then after that, I will be announcing the next round of the class. So for those of you who are interested, stay tuned. It's coming very, very soon. Elemental magic mastery. Why? Because all magic is based on the elements. You can't get away from it. This was another good read. Indeed. All right, all right. So it's the end of this book study. I'll perhaps get some more Hogwarts training, or I might jump on the Fortnite. We'll see. But after that, it certainly will be time to fade into the unicorn once again. Dead Baldale says, I've been wanting to ask more about that course as well. Would you message me back when you have a minute? Absolutely. Absolutely. And Framestar, I will get back with you about Kristen. TK Harris says, thank you. Definitely expanded my perception. Awesome. Awesome. That's what we're here for. Blue, pink. All right, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your evening, rest of the year. I hope you're really setting yourself up to enjoy and to receive the benefits of 2025 because it's yours. This is your year for shizzle, my nizzles. All right, that's it. We out. This is TK Trav, aka Travis Magus, here with LVX777. I love you. Peace.